didn't see you there. It's me, the professor. Welcome to my home. I love the fall. The crisp air, the colorful leaves, bonfires and apple cider, and the perfect weather for curling up in an oversized sweater with a pumpkin spice latte and a good book. This one's my favorite. It's Sing You Home by Jodi Picoult. You know, I think my favorite thing about it is Zoe and Vanessa's friendship. They're just so close. So close, in fact, that, well, spoiler alert, they get married. Oh, isn't that exciting? Being married to your best friend? Now, most of my students say this book is actually about lesbians, and I try not to look at things through a modern lens, but granted, the word lesbian is mentioned quite a lot, and sure, Zoe and Vanessa do kiss a lot, and sure, they do sleep in the same bed together, and sure, they do go on a lot of trips together, and sure, as I've said, they do get married, but they're just doing it as friends. It's just gals being pals. Love will have its sacrifices. No sacrifice without blood. Hey girls, let's talk about vampires. So look, it's October, which means a lot of people are back in school, probably sitting in English Lit talking about Virginia Woolf, and their professor is completely overlooking the fact that she had a girlfriend. Oh yeah, I mean, it's not the most interesting thing about her, but to be honest, I'd pay to sit in a class that talked about her and Vita Sackville West. But instead we talked about Mark on the Wall and stream of consciousness writing, and that is pretty interesting, but I was more inclined to text my girlfriend at the time. All to keep sending me those pics, and you just wait till I come back to North Carolina, you naughty little. What can I say, I'm a horrible person. But even when the personal lives of famous gay authors are mentioned, their sexuality is somehow swept under the rug. I first heard about Emily Dickinson when I was in middle school, and the narrative I was told was that she was a recluse spinster who was more inclined to write her poetry in the privacy of her own home. Said poetry was discovered by her brother and sister-in-law, who were also her next-door neighbors, and published by them post-mortem. I heard this all throughout high school, and this is even the go-to narrative in the 2016 biopic A Quiet Passion. However, well, I think you see where I'm going with this. Susie, will you indeed come home next Saturday and be my own again and kiss me as you used to? I hope for you so much and feel so eager for you. Feel that I cannot wait. Feel that to see your face again makes me feel hot and feverish and my heart beats so fast. That was to her brother's wife, her next door neighbor, Susan Gilbert. This habit of being hesitant to speculate about a person's sexuality isn't exactly new, and any queer student can attest to that. The excuse is always, well, it was a different time, gay people weren't a big thing, and so we can't know for sure. Even though we have letters that straight up say, damn you, spoiled creature, I shan't make you love me any the more by giving myself away like this. But oh my dear, I can't be clever and standoffish with you. I love you too much for that. Too truly. We can even find poems from ancient times that say, I loved you at this years ago when my youth was still all flowers and sighs, and you seemed to me such a small, ungainly girl. Can you forget what happened before? If so, then I'll remind you how, while lying beside me, you wove a garland of crocuses, which I then braided into strands of your hair. And once, when you plaited a double necklace from 100 blooms, I tied around the sweating, sunlit ring of your neck. And on more than one occasion, there were 2 of them to be exact, while I looked on, too silent with adoration to say your name, you glazed your breast and arms with oil. No holy place existed without us, no woodland, no dance, no sound. Beyond all hope, I prayed those timeless days when we spent we might be made twice as long. I prayed one word, I want. Someone, I tell you, will remember us even in another time. Just gals being pals, I guess, right? Right? Look, I'll be fair. Friendships between feminine aligned people tend to be a lot more affectionate. There's a lot of hugging, kissing, and we're not inclined to shout no homo when we say I love you to each other. This need to brush off FF relationships as just mere friendship shows up again and again. In the last decade alone, we saw this when Korra and Asami became canon in Legend of Korra. A lot of fans were outraged because this implication of their feelings for each other seemed to come out of nowhere. Now, since I had never watched this show, I invite you to watch this video by Johnny Two Cellos to learn more about it. But in the video, Johnny says,
if this scene showed Mako comforting Korra in the same way that Asami did, there is no way people would write it off as simple friendship.
Now let's apply that to what we're talking about here. What if these quotes I provided were about a guy? Would the narrative be any different? Well, probably. In Jessica Kelgert-Vosart's video about Emily Dickinson, she touches on how Emily was thought to have been obsessed with mysterious men. Was she? Or is there a chance that her poetry was written about women, or maybe just about Susan, and she just switched up the pronouns? Because gay poets and pronouns, am I right, ladies? Or maybe that wasn't the case. Austen Dickinson had a mistress, Mabel Loomis Thompson, who single-handedly removed any positive mentions of Susan from her poetry. Probably out of sheer jealousy because, well, she was Susan's romantic rival. But not only that, she removed any notion that Emily was actually really fun and outgoing, which... okay. And if you're still raising an eyebrow about Virginia and Vito, well, imagine if this was written to Vita's husband. You might think this was a fairy tale romance blossoming at best. At worst, you might think Vito was a little over-obsessed.
Lesbians, we're really intense.
Unfortunately, because of the times, these weren't exactly the fairy tale romances you expect from intense starts like this. At least that's what I think. We can only expect what would have become of Virginia and Vita had they lived in a more accepting time. Would they still have husbands? Would they divorce their husbands? Would Virginia have lived longer than 59 and not meet her maker at the bottom of the River Ouse? And maybe Dickinson's poems would have been a lot more obvious and there wouldn't be as much infidelity in the Dickinson family. And maybe her Wikipedia page wouldn't say speculative horse shit like some scholars question the poet's sexuality. Emily was never married, and we have letters to her sister-in-law that straight up say, "Babe, come over, I'm horny." Case closed. And with that in mind, suffice it to say, it wasn't as though the lives of gay people weren't present in literature. They were. Oh, they were. You are mine. You shall be mine. You and I are one. One of the earliest known instances of the lesbian vampire trope comes from Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. The story goes that Laura and her father witness a carriage wreck outside of their home, finding a woman and her daughter in the midst of the disaster. While the woman goes to seek help, the daughter, who appears to be around Laura's age, stays with the family. And meanwhile, there's a mysterious illness going around which slowly sucks the life out of its victims, mostly girls. The symptoms being pale skin, strange behavior, and disturbing nightmares. Laura herself begins to exhibit these symptoms but brushes them off when Carmilla admits that she's been having similarly disturbing nightmares.
Last night I dreamt I was trapped under a bed.
You dreamt you were under a bed?
Yeah, above me someone was crying. A little girl in a white nightdress. And then it rained blood down the edges of the bed until I drowned.
How creepily specific.
This story inspired many other folklores about the bloodthirsty vampire, including Bram Stoker's Dracula, adapted into the 1931 film of the same name, and then its 1936 sequel, Dracula's Daughter, which also exhibits some lesbian subtext. And from then on, this became the go-to way for authors to write about lesbians. If you must do it, they have to be blood-sucking monsters. Oh gee, I wonder why when it was stories about female homosexuals, it was a monster that consumes blood. Carmilla and other vampire-themed lore was written as a warning against lesbians. Keep the daughters and wife away. Don't let them be seduced by these sexy, overpowerful creatures. They're only out to recruit and corrupt and groom, and the only way to stop them is to chop their heads off or drive a wooden stick through their hearts. And you wouldn't want to do that to your poor, innocent daughter, would you? Be afraid of this creature of the night. Be very, afraid. I have never been in love, and never shall, unless it should be with you. Another go-to formula for writing stories about lesbians and gay people in general was to write them as hedonistic in some way and giving them a tragic ending. Maybe they did drugs, maybe they drank, or maybe they had some kind of undignifying occupation. But even when they weren't hedonists, the authors still had to write them off as sad in some way just so their stories wouldn't be seen as obscene. The author Lee Lynch writes, "The characters were more miserable than Sartre's, and despised as well." That was until the 1950s and 60s when a new subgenre of lesbian fiction emerged. Lesbian pulp fiction. Hey, you've heard of pulp fiction, right? Well, now get ready for gay shit. Still, it wasn't without its limits. And most authors who wrote these novels had to go by a pen name. One of the most popular stories of this genre, The Price of Salt, was first rejected by Patricia Highsmith's go-to publishers, Harper & Brothers. It was then published by Coward McCann under her pen name Claire Morgan. The Price of Salt was the first lesbian love story that didn't end with one or both of the women having a mental breakdown, dying tragically, usually by suicide, or having one or both of the women converting back to heterosexuality. It wrote lesbian love stories the way it was meant to be written. But also, can I gush about this scene in Carol for just a minute? Okay, so you know how meticulous the cinematography of this scene is? This tells me that whoever filmed this, they read the fucking book, because look at this. Just pause the video and look at this excerpt from the book. Look at how fucking poetic that is. This is art! Carol is art! Okay, I'm done. Even still, in the end, Carol was forced to choose between her relationship with her daughter and with Therese. Now, since the story has been out for 67 years, spoiler alert, she chooses Therese. Still, that's tame in comparison to what everyone else was watching around the same time. In 1961, Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine starred in the 1961 adaptation of The Children's Hour. And in this film, it was just a bratty child's lie that gave its story its tragic turn of events. And that was what the general heteronormative society was watching around that time. These pieces that gave them the message that if you're homosexual, things will go bad. Meanwhile, lesbian pulp fictions provided a glimmer of hope to these girls. Anne Bannon, the author of Odd Girl Out, recounts a time when a fan-turned-friend of hers was headed to a nearby bridge, intending to jump off of it, but then she saw a copy of Odd Girl Out in the drugstore window. She bought the book, read the whole thing, and then went home. These stories were something of a Pandora's box to these girls. Their lives were sad, and they felt pathetic and disgusted with themselves. These stories said, there is a way for you to live a happy ending in a way that everyone wins. Everyone. Darling, darling, I live in you, and you would die for me. I love you so. Now, first and foremost, I want to say that I'm not in any way, shape, or form equating feminism with lesbians. It just so happens that a lot of lesbians tend to be feminist, and that's fine. I mean, I think everyone should believe in equality. That's kind of the point. In any case, a movement that called for the uplifting and empowerment of women, for the most part, can bring with it the free space for women who are attracted to women to make their voices heard. One particular story I'd like to discuss is The Color Purple by Alice Walker, especially since it kinda had a moment this month. The Color Purple has all kinds of representations. We have people of color, all of them poor, and the theme consists of female relationships, mainly between the sisters Celie and Nettie. But also we got bisexuals. Aw yeah. Kind of in direct contrast to what Jill Johnston was proposing. I'll get to her and all the other trans-excluding man-hating rad femmes another day. Side note, I don't know if the title is a reference to the Violets thing, but I'm gonna pretend it is. Because it's fun. And to top it all off, Alice Walker became the first African American woman to win a Pulitzer Prize for this story. So cisgender lesbians were kind of having a moment during the second wave feminist movement. One such faction I'd like to point out is the sex-positive feminist movement, which brought with it the magazine On Our Backs, Playboy for queer girls. The title itself is actually a reference to Off Our Backs, which was a sex-negative feminist publication. Meanwhile, there was also the Naiad Press, a former Missouri-based publishing company founded in 1973, which focused mainly on queer lady stories, or maybe just cisgender lesbians. You never know with second wave feminism. In any case, in addition to other materials, it also republished all the lesbian pulp fictions we know today, including The Price of Salt, republished in 1990 under the new name Carol, and under Patricia Highsmith's actual name. Naiad shut down in 2003, selling its stock to Bella Books, and by then lesbian representation was gaining a lot of traction in mainstream media, all of which I will get to in future videos because, to be honest, I actually had a lot of fun with this one. It's not every day I get to dress like the 19th century gothic blood-sucking vampire I truly am deep down inside. Anyway, good luck in school, happy Halloween, and I hope you read a lot of gay shit. Okay, I cave. Maybe looking at things through a modern lens is for the best. Maybe it gives us a more accurate interpretation of the things we read. I don't know. I don't know what gay relationships are like. Like, how am I supposed to know that when someone says girlfriend, they mean that they're just good friends or that they're actually intimate with each other? And what am I supposed to make of an author saying she kissed her, whether it means on the face, on the lips, and what does it mean when it's on the lips? Either way, maybe I should be a little less harsh on my students for seeing things differently.